If you've ever wondered what the heck you actually said at the end of that party,
or wanted a do-over button for those cringe-worthy encounters,
then you've experienced what we call the joy of awkwardness.
I'm Mendy.
And I'm Bree.
And we're here to celebrate the awkward.
Embrace the awkward.
And remind you of one important thing.
You may be awkward,
but you're definitely not alone.
Well, that was awkward. Hi, Mendy.
Hi, Bree.
Today we have such a fun day because we have a guest coming on the podcast for the first time.
It's so exciting.
I'm going to tell you all about him in just a minute. But first, did you have any awkward moments from this week?
Oh, I did, Bree. So I had a stand-up gig. It went well. I did my job. But this was my first time having this happen where from on stage I could see that this one woman was shooting daggers at me just the entire time. No matter what I did, she was just like total stone-faced, angry lasers. And I didn't do anything controversial except, the Kegel thing, but that's more girl power stuff. And I noticed too that she would also turn her head all the way away from me at times and put up her hand. Just look all the way at the back of the room. And then
put her hand in front of her face?
Yes. I was like, wow, she really wants me to know that she is not picking up what I'm putting down. And, that's okay. And I was like the second one to go. And then after I went off stage, I was watching, of course, the other performers who were doing a great job. And I watched her too. And I noticed that when she turned to the back, I was sitting in the back, she would turn and laugh her ass off. She was laughing, and then she would comport herself and turn back around and stare.
She was gatekeeping her laugh.
She was. She did not want us to know that she was enjoying it. I have never encountered that before in my life. It was pretty amazing.
Did she just do it with you, or did she do it with other people?
No, she did it with other people. That's how I knew what she was doing, because I saw what she was doing when she turned. I thought maybe she was turning around and like rolling her eyes very big, or God knows what. But no, she was laughing and smiling. She had a beautiful smile. She seemed so joyful. I wish I had seen that part of her when I was working so hard on that mic.
Well, maybe that's a lesson in that what looks like a cold shoulder can actually be a joyful guffaw.
That's right. She was giving me the cold shoulder, but the people behind her were getting all her sunshine.
I'm sorry that she didn't share her laughs with you, but I'm glad that you were able to see that she was laughing in the end. Because you're funny. And 2 of Mendy's stand-up sets are on YouTube. You should go check them out. We'll put the link to them in the show notes.
Hey, thanks, Bree. What's your awkward moment?
I have a very short awkward moment, and that is today I was on the phone with my daughter, and we kept kind of missing each other. You know what I mean? She would call and she would miss me, and then I would call and I would miss her. And
phone tag.
So we kept, total phone tag. And then we were on, but then she had to go. And so she hung up. I'm driving in the car, right? The phone rings again. I think it's her. So I answer, what? It wasn't her. It was a tech guy from Rode Microphones who was absolutely wonderful. He laughed. I explained that I thought it was my daughter, and he helped me solve the tech problem while I was driving.
Rude. I thought you were this person who is so precious to me, and that's why I was so mean.
All right, Mendy, I really want to tell you about our guest today.
Oh, please do.
We are going to get super nerdy in the world of emotions and awkwardness, and all of the wonderfully weird ways that we connect with each other.
Oh, yay.
And we have a fabulous, fabulous friend of mine, Dr. Jim Coan. He's a guy who's not just a professor of psychology and not just the mastermind behind the Virginia Affective Neuroscience Lab, but he's also someone who's been on everything from National Geographic's Brain Games. Have you ever seen Brain Games?
No.
Oh my gosh, you have to watch it.
Okay.
To NPR. He's like the Indiana Jones of emotional research. He's explored it all. He did a TED Talk on hand-holding.
Oh.
I know. And like what it does to your brain when you hold hands with your partner. And today he's going to talk about why awkward moments can actually bring us closer.
The power of awkward. That's come up with us before. How awkward moments help us make new friends. It's our number one way of making new friends, I think.
We know it and we feel it on a personal and anecdotal level, but he is going to talk about the science of it. Stuff that I don't make up.
This isn't us just justifying why we yell at people who call us on the phone.
This is not ChatGPT research. This is like a real scientist coming in to talk about this.
This is awesome. We have an awkward doctor. Dockward. That's awkward.
All right, so let's bring Jim in. Jim, this is Mendy. Mendy, this is Jim.
Hi, nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too. Welcome.
You're our first guest on the show. It's usually just the two of us telling anonymous stories.
It's a fascinating idea for a podcast. It's wonderful. It's really, I learned a lot of stuff that I should know already just by thinking about your podcast.
Oh, just by thinking about it?
Yeah, just by thinking about it.
Just by daydreaming.
I feel edified. Yeah.
Oh, good. Then you can edify us too.
Well, let's hope so.
Because we act like we know a lot.
We play the confidence game.
Let's just say we're not rigorous in our research.
Well, the way I like to put it is I'm not a perfectionist.
Good, neither are we. It's so great to have you here. Mendy, do you want to start?
Yes. Jim, how would you, in your professional opinion, how would you describe an awkward moment or what awkwardness is?
All my career, I've been studying relationships and emotion and sort of neural components of that. When I think about awkward moments, I think about sort of two components, really. One is that sort of telltale, emotionally uncomfortable thing that's either going on or potentially going on. Oftentimes it's not there yet, and that's part of what creates the awkwardness. And two, in addition to that, like one or both parties is not either willing or able to communicate directly, right? They're like awkward because one or both parties is conflicted about communicating what they're thinking or what they're feeling, or they're hearing something that makes them uncomfortable. You know, because of all of this, emotional communication can get even more awkward quickly because they're like, the fact that they are feeling something important but are having trouble communicating about it just often starts this dance of awkward communication that collects and expands on missteps and misunderstandings, often enough like poor judgment. When I think about missteps, you know, I was once asked about Joe Biden by a reporter who was like a little worried that Joe Biden touches people too much. And this kind of hit home for me because I think I do that. I'm very touchy. Some people are more touchy than others, and I'm huggy and backslappy and handholdy, but not everybody is. And so sometimes awkward situations come from just sort of misstepping, you know, not connecting in the way that someone else or we would like to be connecting. But then there's misunderstandings. Like, you know, one kind of hilarious thing that happened to me once. I was dropping off a friend after a party we'd been to, and she had a boyfriend, I had a girlfriend. We were friends, and I was dropping her off. Anyway, I took her to her door, and my stupid old Chevy had a crummy door, and the passenger door handle was kind of weird and broken, and you had to fiddle with it to open it up. So dumbly, stupidly, when I got to her house, I just leaned over to mess with the handle. And I went to jiggle the handle because I knew she wouldn't be able to open it herself. And anyway, you might be able to guess, when I started to lean over her, she suddenly leaned in and gave me a kiss.
Oh!
Assuming that's what I was, that's what I was up to. And I was not, friends. That is not what I was up to. And I did this sort of, you know, sitting in a car equivalent of leaping away. And, you know, suddenly tried to explain about the door handle.
Well, that was awkward.
Oh, that's great.
So what did you say?
I mean, we never really recovered from that. I explained what was going on. I felt bad. She was super embarrassed. It was awkward. It was very, very awkward. And we never really were able to talk about it afterward. But that's like an awkwardness caused by a misunderstanding.
Totally.
It was like a transcription error. But then there's also the poor judgment thing that I mentioned. Like, this is where, someone plows ahead with an uncomfortable topic that nobody else wants to talk about. Very occasionally, I do the poor judgment, awkward thing. Just taking my family, they might say, well, I got my chakras adjusted and I feel so much better. And I'll do the classic, like push my glasses up on my nose and go, there's no such thing as a chakra. Like an asshole. And that's poor judgment. That's the wrong time. And now everyone is in the awkwardness room.
I do that too. I do it with my kids all the time. So my kids and their friends will be hanging out, young adults, and they will be talking about whatever. Let's say there's some gossip going on, right?
Yeah.
I will be all in for the gossip. I love teenage gossip.
Yeah, it's the best.
But then I'm the one who always says something like, well, they were abandoned as a child.
Oh, God. They were dropped on their head.
Totally. Or do you know when they were 5 years old, they had this terrible thing happen and they're just like, Mom.
You ruined the whole gossip session.
Yes.
Now I can't feel the thing that I was hoping to feel straightforwardly.
Right. So I make things awkward too. Mendy, do you ever make things awkward?
Oh, yes, we've talked about this. I am a fiercely loyal person, Jim. Bree knows this. This was from an earlier episode. I brought up this awkward moment where a woman fussed at my partner in public, and he hadn't done anything wrong. We were in the therapy pool at the gym. He moved his foot, and I could tell he had brushed her. And I, wanting to make a joke, said, "Did he kick you?" Thinking she'd laugh. And she was like, "Yes, he did kick me. And he needs to be more careful because I'm in here doing my therapy." And my superpower is that I will make it awkward because I said to her, well, we're all in here doing our therapy and maybe we all need to be careful while we're doing our therapy and look where we're going.
You threw down.
He didn't do anything wrong. He was doing his therapy. But something you said early on when you were talking about awkwardness, and I want to know if I'm right and also smart because you're a professional, is that I feel awkwardness also comes out of something happening that we have no societal rule about or no chapter in the guidebook that we can flip to. We're sort of in this space of unknown and grasping for what is the appropriate reaction at that time. So am I smart and right?
100%.
Thank you.
Yeah. I mean, I think that fits into, the transcription error. When there's no script, you do your best, right? But doing your best is it's like a probabilistic affair. It's like you cast your line and you hope that it's the right one if you don't know what to do. And often enough, it's not going to be the right one. And you're going to be up awkwardness creek.
So do you think there's a reason for awkwardness, Jim? Do you think there's a purpose for it?
I don't know whether there's a purpose, but there's a quality to it that I think we might not fully appreciate sometimes.
You are an expert in relationships, and I'm really curious to know what is the role that awkwardness plays in relationships?
Yeah, well, the first thing I think of when I think about awkwardness in relationships is the mystery of how people create relationships. It might seem ridiculous to you. It's ridiculous. One of the biggest mysteries in the science of relationships is how exactly people progress from like strangers to lovers. Nobody really knows how that happens. Nobody's really charted it out, yet we've sort of all done it. Sometimes it happens quickly, but a lot of times it goes really slowly with lots of, advances and feints and retreats. And since I'm going with a fencing metaphor, only the occasional en garde. We're not really sure what's happening a lot of the time. Sort of the way I see it, there's no simple set of rules and solutions for this really very awkward process. It's rough, but the thing that I think people forget is that it's also exciting. So if I think in terms of the role awkwardness might play, I think there's this kind of elusive quality that people frequently make reference to in relationships. The spark. Talk about the spark. What is that? I think that's rooted a little bit in the emotional tension, that the sort of weird unknowns and potential misunderstandings that come sort of part and parcel of awkwardness entails. As relationships grow, that very awkwardness often starts to fade away, sometimes to next to nothing. And I think that can maybe sometimes kind of signal a kind of stagnation. Awkwardness is partly a signal that something is mysterious and that there's more left to know and pursue in ways that you'll get wrong sometimes, right? And that wrong part is what we often think of when we think of awkwardness, because you don't like to be wrong. But maybe that wrongness can brighten things a little bit, raise the stakes, stoke some flames. I think it's important for relationships to grow and change, for people in them to grow and change in these. And in some ways, maybe just for this purpose. You're going to grow and change no matter what. So I guess I'm hoping for the best, that when you grow and change, that sense of awkwardness can also signal a kind of continued investment or engagement.
You're so curious about the other person as you have agreed to grow and evolve together.
Right. Again, I'll bring up that, one of the qualities of awkwardness is that it's kind of, as my kids would say, cringy. There's something about it that's hard, right? Like you're wrong. You say something embarrassing. You assume something incorrectly, or you bring up a topic that maybe you're not all ready for, or you got who knows what. But it's that wrongness. It's that potential for being wrong, and it's that sometimes being wrong that lights a little bit of that fire.
It's funny because as you're saying this, on one side, I hear that sort of the fricative element of awkwardness, of that discomfort, right? That friction can really help to spark, right? But also on the other side of that, I wonder, the recovery from the awkward moment, is that also part of what then builds a stronger relationship? Because I know that I am often very awkward with Jeff and Mendy, my two longest relationships. And we can get very, very awkward. And I know that even if something goes terribly awry, there's a forgiveness and acceptance, a moving forward, a sense of belonging, that as awkward or raw or challenging as I may be as a human, that I'm still being accepted by the people in my life. Do you think that's part of it?
Yeah.
That wonderful feeling, that feeling of, I messed up and you're still here. That's such a great feeling.
Oh my God. So, during the pandemic, a lot of reporters called me up because they were like, hey, Mr. Hand-holding guy, we can't touch each other now. We can't be around. What are we going to do? It freaked me out a little bit. So I became a little bit less of a, sort of experimental scientist and a little bit more of a scholar. And I started really reaching out into fields like behavioral ecology, anthropology, more sort of basic social psychology, really trying to figure out, what do we do now? And in my wanderings, what I discovered is that the way that bonding works is almost just exactly what Bree was just describing. Bonding works like this. I make myself vulnerable in some way, and then you respond positively. And then we take turns reversing that sequence. And you'd sort of do it over and over again. But the thing is, the bonding doesn't work unless the vulnerability part is real. And what makes vulnerability real? It means there's a credible risk that you're going to humiliate yourself or embarrass yourself in some way. If that's not credible, it doesn't work as well. So there's an element to, I don't know, maybe what I'd call functional awkwardness that really includes vulnerability. And interestingly, two things happened. One of the things that I discovered was one of the most awkward situations I personally can imagine is karaoke.
Is this the singing or having to sit there and listen to it?
All of it. The whole thing.
Right.
All of the whole package is more than I can bear. I think maybe because, I go deeper in with a lot less stimuli. I don't need that level of potential humiliation.
To feel humiliated.
Right. But the thing that's really interesting about karaoke is that it comes out of, Japan and adjacent cultures where, the social stakes can be quite high, and there are a lot more sort of social rules in day-to-day interaction. And it seems interesting, not just to me, but to a lot of people, that out of this culture comes karaoke, where you have this structured social ritual where people expose themselves to potential serious humiliation and then embrace each other instead. And that is a very, very good way to create emotional attachments and bonds. It works. I tried it out. I got interviewed by a reporter at the New Yorker who's a war correspondent, and she was having a very stressful time during the pandemic. And she, at some point, mentioned that she was feeling very lonely. She hadn't been out of her, I can't even believe this, out of her apartment in New York City for 6 weeks. I asked her if I could sing to her.
Oh.
And I did. And she cried. And it's because the situation isn't confined to the person who's supposedly taking the risk. The act of someone being vulnerable with you is extremely intimate. And that's also where bonding can occur.
Does that mean that narcissists or sociopaths, are they capable of feeling awkwardness?
I mean, I don't know, but I think not in the same way that the rest of us do. I think that what's awkward to them will be, they're not being adored right now. And that feels strange and off-putting. I mean, I already can tell just from you guys, your whole thing, I can tell that awkwardness is much more expansive than that. It's like a whole universe of feelings.
That's really why we're doing this podcast to help people feel more comfortable getting less comfortable, right?
Yeah. Oh, I love that. There's a whole episode of my podcast. The title of the episode is Avoidance. The point of that entire hour-long episode is avoiding discomfort creates discomfort.
Mm-hmm.
The way to have an anxiety disorder is to try and not experience anxiety.
We're going to link that in the show notes. So people can go, if you're interested in that, you can go listen to that.
Yes, I've heard that before. You have to go through it. You can't go around it.
Yes. And after having made that episode, I think of avoiding discomfort as the sort of kryptonite of mental health.
And relationships?
And relationships, for sure. Yeah. Discomfort is the key to the kingdom, man.
Darn it.
So you guys are doing a great service.
Well, that's good, because I tell you what, every week there's a vulnerability hangover.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Oh, my gosh.
It's real.
I'm texting Bree like, should I have said that? So, Jim, did you bring an awkward moment to tell us about today?
I did.
Oh, goody.
And it involves my own podcast, which is called Circle of Willis, which you can find on circleofwillispodcast.com. There are many episodes, but one of them, which I did a few years ago, seemed just like an easy, simple idea when I first set it up. It was with a researcher named Nicole Prause. The thing is that's fascinating about Nicole, there are many things that are fascinating about Nicole, or Nikki, as she goes, is that she's one of the few researchers really in the world, believe it or not, who does basic research on sex, but not just sex. She studies the psychophysiology of orgasm.
Mm-hmm.
That's fun.
Which means that she has to make people, complete strangers, orgasm in her laboratory.
Ooh. So where is her lab? Just wondering.
It's in Los Angeles. Where else?
Well, yeah, where else?
Okay, trip to Los Angeles.
Yeah, right. So, my podcast is about interesting science and the scientists who do it. And so she certainly fit the bill. But here's the thing I learned when I went out to California to interview her. I have a really, really hard time, guys, talking about sex, like with anybody. I mean, I don't now so much, but she's part of the reason for that because I had to. And I don't know why this didn't really sink in until I was sitting in the conference room waiting for her to come in to do the interview. I remember I'm sitting there and I start having like a full-on panic attack because I'm starting to realize that I don't know how to interview anyone like her. I mean, I can talk about emotions, I can talk about awkwardness, I can talk about brain stuff, I can talk about genetics, I can talk about lots of physics, but sex? What was I going to do? What if she said, penis? I'd just die. I would just drop dead. I can't do that. I didn't know this about me until I was in that situation.
We use words like wiener. That kind of helps us.
Well, that's a little better.
Stupid, cute words to just, but you can't really do that on a
she's
podcast.
A scientist.
Yeah, right.
Right? So she's not going to do that. So I'm sitting there, I start going down this whole rabbit hole of terrible things that are about to happen. I'm going to freeze. I'm going to ask terrible questions. I'm going to blush the whole time. I'm going to giggle the whole time and be like a junior high school kid. And I just was intimidated by her for all kinds of reasons. It was insane. And sure enough, well, she comes in and we start talking about her work. And you know what she does? She says penis. A lot.
Did you giggle?
So here's the thing. She starts talking about vibrators and pornography. And I find myself having to ask her the obvious question: how do you make someone orgasm in your lab? And she describes this whole contraption she's got set up where she sets them up with a vibrator in the room by themselves. And there's screens and blah, blah, blah. But, she had to test all that stuff on herself. And I didn't know how to, it was awful, but it was also amazing. And yes, I did laugh. I laughed constantly. I could not stop. It was so horrible. You can tell that when you listen to the podcast. I'm just all messed up. And I kind of just did it. I just pushed through and did it. So I learned a lot about myself during that conversation, but I've never had an interview like that before or since. I don't know if there's any meaning to the word awkward at all. It's what I felt the entire time.
Well, that was awkward.
Did you ever speak to her directly about it?
We did debrief, and she was merciless. She started making jokes that just made it so difficult for me sometimes. Because once she realized that this was a way to make me nervous, she thought that was hilarious. But I got through it. It was fine.
Has it changed the way that you are or are not able to engage in conversations about sex now? Like if we say the word penis, is it going to make you cringe or are you okay?
I'm fine. It's not my favorite. Certainly it doesn't freak me out to have an adult conversation about sexual organs anymore. Here's what I discovered though. And this is apropos our earlier conversation about maybe one of the ways that awkwardness can be functional. I thought that my giggling and that my nervousness was going to be a problem for that episode. I was cringing a little bit when I released it because I thought, well, I don't take this that seriously. But I think the awkwardness came through the interview. And the feedback I got from listeners is that they loved it. So this is one of the things that surprised me. Lots of people, it turns out, find those topics a little bit hard to talk about. They loved the giggling. They found that helped them inhabit their own conflicted, awkward feelings and sort of just embrace the whole situation. My own father called me up after he listened to that one, still laughing himself, saying that was the best interview he'd heard me do. And I asked why. And he's like, because you were so funny. It was so funny to hear you be so nervous.
People love tension, right?
But they also like vulnerability.
Mm-hmm.
I think that what I'm really glad that I did was that I stuck with it and I just let it be awkward for me.
Yeah.
The discomfort that I felt came through the way that I communicated, and it was therefore believable. And believable discomfort is the name of the game. That's when that sort of feeling of vulnerability becomes something that you can really relate to. One of the things that I've discovered, especially in people's responses to that interview, is that when you are believably vulnerable and people can relate to you, they feel better about their own discomfort. Their own discomforts are normalized and made a little bit less unpleasant.
Our first episode had to do with vibrators, and both Bree and I were really uncomfortable talking about it. And I didn't know that about her because we never talk about them until we had to talk about them. And it was recorded.
Yeah. At some point, Nikki Prasi just casually mentions the magic wand. And I go, what's the magic wand? And she goes, oh my God. And I was like, what? What did I just say? What did I do wrong now? What? And apparently I was supposed to know and didn't, that's like the most common vibrator. And she thought that was absolutely common knowledge. And then, this is another iteration of my feelings of I've blown it.
But you made it through.
I don't know. I made it through.
And you're not alone in not knowing.
You got two more people right here who are right there with you. And I remember after our first episode about vibrators, which the next time you have to go into a conversation with a sex expert, I recommend listening to our first episode.
I will.
I was really nervous for my mom to hear it. And my mom loved it. She loved the whole story about the vibrators. She thought it was wonderful. She was like, I never thought that I would hear you talking about that.
We didn't think so either.
So do you have any advice for people who are in an awkward situation like that?
Yeah, I guess I would draw on my own experience and say, if there's a single piece of advice I really have for listeners, it's to sort of love yourselves and remind yourselves that the heightened emotions that come with awkwardness will pass and that they might even miss those emotions once they're gone, if they go. Whatever else is true, chances are pretty good that whoever you are, you arrived at your awkward moment honestly, even if it's the result of some kind of poor judgment. Awkwardness is sort of built into our lives because we aren't perfect communicators. And because we often want or believe different things, and because we often want different things from each other. There's probably no way out of that. It's like part of the stuff of our lives. It's part of what our lives are made of. It's not a failing. It's the process by which and through which we figure out how to connect.
And Jim, we always rate our awkward moments somewhat arbitrarily on a scale of 1 to 10 after we tell the stories.
Let's have Jim rate his awkward moment first.
It's so subjective. It probably doesn't sound that awkward as I've told it.
Well, that's what we found, that it really depends on our perspective and our own. We're self-conscious about different things and have different soft spots and tender spots. So we will have different ratings based on our own isms.
Yeah. Do you know what was most awkward about it for me? It wasn't the word penis or vagina. It wasn't catching myself asking her how she made people orgasm. It wasn't even all the giggling. It was the reflection, the knowledge that I had that I was made uncomfortable by these things. That was like a weird surprise.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was kind of disappointed in myself. I was like, am I like some kind of Puritan or something? I'm not. I know that about myself. So it took me by surprise a little bit. I'm really glad with the way that it worked out, though. So how would I rate it? I don't know. 7. I would say maybe my car kiss moment that I told you about earlier, that was maybe an 8. That was pretty awkward.
Since you rated both moments, I'll give both moments a rating. If I were in that situation, If I were having a panic attack going into an interview, it would be a 9.
Whoa, that's some perspective.
It's the panic attack that got me.
Yeah, that's rough.
The car kiss, I think I would also give an 8. I think that would be about an 8.
Yeah, that was super weird. It like happened in slow motion at some point. Like time slows down like a car wreck.
Yep.
Like it felt like a car wreck.
Mendy, how would you rate it?
I actually am having a little bit of a stress response around both of these. So for the interview, I would say a 9 because it did catch you by surprise. And I know those moments where you're like, yes, I'm going to go meet with this person and we're going to talk about this. Like, there's my notes.
We talk about vaginas.
And we're going to talk about vaginas. But then to be about to go and speak to her, and this is your one shot, you're recording her.
Yeah.
You are also a professional in the same similar fields. And you can't get in there and just be a Mr. Gigglebox when she starts talking about body parts.
Yeah.
That would be a 9 for me, just not knowing if I can control my response.
By the way, I'm making myself a t-shirt now that says Mr. Gigglebox. I just
Mr. Gigglebox.
I'm going to take that.
Your students will like that.
On the back, it can say, but only when you talk about sex.
Yes, Ray. The car is a 10 for me. The car is a 10.
Whoa, 10.
Big time 10 because, okay, you were both with other people and you were friends. So I'm thinking of the aftermath, and I think of my partner's friends whose friendships I treasure, and for them to hit me with that kiss, and you never talked about it. It could have been they were like, I didn't want to hurt your feelings, but we do need to have a conversation about this. Or did they always have a crush on you, which completely destroys your friendship because then those boundaries aren't in place for you to maintain that friendship? Oh, yeah, that's a 10 for me.
We always try to say what we have done in that situation, but Mendy has an imaginary friend, Dana, who gets her out of every situation. Mendy, if you choose one of those situations, how can Dana get you out of it?
Dana's going to have a hard time with this.
Maybe, this is pushing it, but since you were talking to this woman who studies orgasm, during the giggling, I might say, my ex-girlfriend in college, her kink was tickling. So whenever I talk about vaginas, I get the giggles. It's a
Pavlovian response.
Yes, it's a Pavlovian response. You say vagina, and I get the giggles. And
yeah,
gosh, college was fun.
Nikki would say, "Sure."
We didn't say we were scientifically accurate.
Okay, but what about the car?
What does Dana do about the car? So you've got a person, because it's not about the car door being broken. It's about somebody giving you a smooch and then dealing with it afterwards.
Not even really a smooch, like an attempted smooch, like a glancing smooch, like a smooch attack that I parried and leaped away from.
See, I wonder if there's some kind of excuse you could make to her to take care of her feelings and also let her know that this is not going to happen. And you would have had to think very quickly, but she's coming at you for the kiss, right? And you just go like, oh, hey, Dana, did you see that's my cousin Dana back there? So it didn't look like you were avoiding, but also you can still never talk to her ever, ever again.
Good job, Mendy.
Usually it takes me more time to think of my evil plans.
We put her on the spot. It was awkward.
Dana helps me avoid discomfort, which you've taught me I need to stop doing.
Jim, how can people get in touch with you? How can they find you? You have such a wealth of knowledge to offer people. How can people get in touch with your work?
You can start just by Googling. If you Google my name, you'll get some stuff that you can read through or you can watch or listen to. If you want to listen to the podcast, you can go to Circle of Willis Podcast. And otherwise, you can find me at the Department of Psychology at the University of Virginia. And all my contact information is there.
How do people get to work in your lab?
Usually they just ask.
All right, Mendy and I'll be there on Monday.
And would you let Bree and I know if you do any experiments involving snacks?
Snacks and orgasms, right? That's the one. I'll let Nikki know.
Yeah, we're there.
All right. Thank you so much for joining us.
Well, thanks for asking me to come on and chat.
Jim Coan's a neuroscientist.
Plus, he's very chivalrous.
Tried to open a door, but he got a kiss.
Well, that was awkward. So if you turn red when you hear penis,
Even though you're a real genius.
know that discomfort is the path to weenus.
Weenus?
Mendy, I meant like weenus. Well, that was awkward.
Oh, the times people have tried to show me the path to their weenus.
This has been an Awkward Sage production.